Welcome to VCR, a vintage cinema rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Michael.
And welcome to part 2, our deep dive into Castle in the Sky, one of Studio Ghibli's first ever films.
That's right.
Nani?
Jason, you could do that 3 more times before it gets old.
Okay. This is the first time I think I've heard that not as a meme before, but as part of the actual movie.
Sincerely.
Yeah, and it just means what?
That's pretty cool. I want to watch the Japanese version now.
Very good.
So let's start with our in front of the camera discussion, talking about plot and spoilers and everything else. And if you haven't seen this film, I think we all really enjoyed it, and I would recommend going and checking out the first part, our primer episode, before we really dive deep into spoilers here so that we don't ruin anything from this film for you.
Did we say that it's Castle in the Sky yet?
Yeah, I think I said Castle in the Sky right off the bat.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. I'm pretty sure. I mean, it'll either be here or it'll be earlier in the episode, so...
Or it'll be in the title, so
True.
Pick up your phone, look at what you're watching, and just make sure we're not spoiling
Make
it.
decisions about what you're listening to.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, I think Ghibli's next film was Howl's Moving Castle, and it's also on Netflix, and my roommate saw it, and he was like, what is with this guy in castles?
They're great settings, especially the way they created these, the moving castle and the castle in the sky. They're just such fun concepts.
Yeah, definitely.
So, to kind of open our discussion of the film, to get back into it, let's talk the opener of the film. And A, there's the opener, and B, the credits. Because they're two very distinct things that jump out in my mind. The opener of this film is the pirates landing on the ship and just chaos ensuing. And it really we dive into the plot. It's like the opener of The Dark Knight Rises, essentially.
That's exactly what
kinda.
I was going to mention. It felt like they were the Joker, and it was just hitting you over the head with this excitement right off the bat. Like
when Sheeta turned to Muska and said, perhaps he's wondering why you shoot a man, then throw him out the plane.
And then she falls out the plane.
Or something.
Yeah, and so, we really just dive into the action right off the bat, which is really cool. I will say I was a little bit bewildered because I wasn't necessarily prepared for the world and what was going on.
I felt the same.
Yeah. I do have one actual complaint about the opening scene in retrospect. So Sheeta is being held captive by Colonel Muska. We don't really know he's the bad guy at this point. We kind of get the impression that he's her bodyguard. And then while he's rummaging around his suitcase or something, she grabs a wine bottle, beans him over the head, and escapes. And as cool as that is, it makes us like Sheeta a lot. I do think a little girl knocking out our main villain in the first 5 minutes kind of makes him lose a bit of his villain cred.
I was also slightly just confused by it, if I'm being completely honest. I didn't know who these characters were yet, and like you said, I kind of was under the assumption that they were together, and they were, but it was under duress, as we find out later.
Yeah. I think they could have easily just, instead of Muska, it could have just been one of his henchmen. I just think showing the main villain getting one-upped that quickly in the movie kind of makes him lose some of his menace later.
Yeah, they didn't really lead in with a Darth Vader moment where he's coming in later. We'd already seen him, but we didn't know who he was, and the reveal was pretty good. Even when we see him next, we don't really know who he is. We just assume government CIA guy, and then eventually it gets revealed.
And I did really kind of appreciate how we kind of start off thinking the Sky Pirates are the bad guys, but they pretty quickly turn out to be on the hero's side, or at least, the lesser of two evils.
Yes, the lesser of two evils here,
or at least, grudging allies.
Yeah, I agree, and it's really cool because it adds a little bit more depth to the movie, right? This is a movie that that's full of depth, but that extra piece of like who we think is the bad guys are actually maybe not quite all that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're treasure hunters essentially, but they have some morals, whereas the government and Muska don't have any morals, it seems like.
Have you seen that meme that's been going around where it's a screenshot of a children's book from Disney where it shows little kids dressed as pirates and the text is something like, being a pirate means never taking anything that doesn't belong to you. And the meme is something like, I don't think Disney knows what a pirate is. That's kind of the vibe I got from these guys. It's like, we hear they're pirates, but we don't really see them causing much trouble, except for property damage.
Yeah, that property damage, they were just destroying track for like a good 10 minutes. That probably would take that mining village like years to recover from, and now they can't get food into their village.
That's a good
point. They didn't give a shit who they were hurting by proxy there. So like they're super out for themselves in the beginning, and it's like they act very villainous, but then once we get to know them, they take care of their own. And so if you're good with them, the way Pazu and Shida eventually like become friends with them, they like, it's a respect thing. I think they respected how badass these kids.
It's a welcome to the family.
Yeah, exactly. So that was really fun.
We talk about that, and maybe that's the operative point, is that they're fun. Like, they're funny. Like, can we talk about how funny that scene is at the beginning where they have the flexing contest where they all break their shirts? Yeah, that was so funny.
Yes, that was laugh out loud funny. Like, Jess and I were both laughing together watching that scene.
And even just the idea of like this old lady pirate and all her like immature adult sons, like, it's pretty funny.
And that's where some of like the childishness comes in, that even as an adult you're going to enjoy, and slightly because it's almost like outlandish to a Western audience in a way, right? Like, it's not something that we typically see in a Disney film.
It was interesting to see that in one of these, because like we've all seen some kind of anime where the main character like hulks out of their shirt. But like, I didn't expect that in a Studio Ghibli film, and it just shows like how rooted in like tradition that kind of is within anime.
Well, and how maybe this is a pioneer in that, in a sense as well, right? Like like this came before shows like Dragon Ball Z and other famous.
I don't think Goku ever flexed out of his shirt.
There's no way that Goku didn't flex out of his shirt.
No, but the deal is, if he takes his shirt off, that's a sign that he's getting serious.
Oh, okay. He just like puts it off, like folds it.
Yeah.
For later.
Pretty much.
Can we also talk about the credits? The opening credits of this film are magical. They, in a sense, kind of explain the history and the legend of Laputa, and how humans began living in the sky and in these sky kingdoms, and how eventually something happened to make them all return to Earth. And I really loved that little bit of lore. And obviously it's the opening credits. There's no dialogue. There's no like Star Wars like opening lead in kind of thing. And with none of that, this film really, really builds a lot of lore just with the imagery in the first like 2 minutes.
It's also got that kind of like storybook woodcutter vibe. Like, it really kind of grounds you in that like fairy tale mentality almost.
Yeah, and especially like the damsel in distress falling from the sky and then floating, and she has some magical stone. Like, I enjoyed that opening sequence quite a bit.
It was pretty good. I got something to talk about. So, like I said, this is my first Ghibli movie, but I did kind of look into the production process, just, you know, to find out more about how they work. And did you know that Hayao Miyazaki doesn't work with traditional screenplays? It's almost kind of similar to what Genndy Tartakovsky did with Samurai Jack, in that there's no official screenplay, but it's just they kind of see where the story goes as they create the storyboards.
So they're like the Stephen Kings?
Yeah. I was going to make that comparison.
But they can stick a landing more frequently.
More frequently, I guess. I mean, I'm sure there was probably multiple rounds of edits or whatever, but yeah, it's all storyboards. It's all hand drawn. There's a little bit of computer animation just in certain places, but it's all hand drawn. And apparently Miyazaki, the mad lad, he oversees every single frame.
Wow.
Yeah, he is relentless.
That's really impressive. And as a kid of the 90s and growing up where like this type of animation style was like really the central focus of my animation viewing, like I have a lot of nostalgia for this kind of experience.
Nostalgia's a good word for it, because like I said, this was my first Studio Ghibli movie, but it was making me nostalgic, like just for, I don't know, simpler times or childhood or innocence or something like that.
To me, it also felt like really elevated compared to all of those other, like anything I saw in my childhood. How they created such like mystical scenes, I still don't know how they did it. Like, how did they paint it that well and like animate it? I don't fully understand, because it's so amazing. Like like the depth, the colors, and like how, especially so after Pazu wakes up and he's like doing his little trumpet thing, like the clouds and the birds going through them, like that was amazing. Setting up his like village and like the world on the ground that way was like, it really transports you.
There is something very like, just in the way, like we've been talking about the world a lot, but I like to focus a little bit on the character designs. Like, these are some of the most expressive, striking characters I'd ever seen in an animation. Even just like when Pazu is talking about how he's going to find the castle in the sky, and he's just flexing. Like he's just standing there flexing. Like,
yeah, it's a really heartfelt moment too, right?
Yeah.
Because like he's talking about his father and what his father saw in the sky all those years ago, and that really cool picture, and then we get that background story of all of that. Like, it's all these little details that kind of add up to make something really special here, right?
yeah, absolutely. Actually, the dynamic between Pazu and Shida is surprisingly heartwarming. Like, I know that they're like, I don't know, 13 or 14 or something, but like,
And
I don't know.
they're just two little orphans who their like stories are intertwined, and like Pazu was kind of always, you could tell he was like dreaming of something like this, like something to set him off on this huge adventure to Laputa, and then this girl just magically falls from the sky, and just floats down. Like you could, that, I think that's where all of his excitement came from. Like, he'd been holding that in all the time because he has to work, but he's like, he had this dream.
And actually, on that note, I actually want to quickly mention here that this is the first time since we're in spoilers, that the Japanese versus English versions, we actually somewhat watched different movies in that sense, because the version that Mike and I watched, the English dub, the voices and the age that they were trying to capture with their voice work of Pazu and Shida was actually like teenagers, whereas what Jason was watching was preteens and younger voicing and voice acting. So that almost kind of makes their dynamic and their relationship and kind of who they are as people very different. And as somebody who was watching the English dub, there were times where it almost conflicted to me because they were talking in a much more childish tone, but I was like, I think that they're trying to go for a little bit older kids than what they're portraying here in their voices.
Well, should we bring up the awkward elephant in the room?
What's that?
The scene where all the male sky
was...
pirates hit on Shida. I was like, oh, what's going on here?
It might have been extra shocking for me then because of her like how young she's been portrayed this whole time.
Right.
Because she
Yeah.
like I felt that like it was very strange because I was like, this girl's like 11.
12?
Yeah.
11, yeah, 10 or 11, yeah.
And like those guys were all men, and like I was like, at least one of them brought a flower, but like that's still manipulative.
In the English dub, he just walks in with the flower and says, "I love you."
Oh yeah, so
Just shouts
that
it.
was never written into the version I watched. It was like none of them had that proclamation of love.
Oh, really? Just, I brought you a flower.
That's definitely one part of this movie that probably doesn't hold up in today's climate. And
Yeah.
it was almost comical because of how overdone it was in a sense. But yeah, it doesn't take long to point the flaws in that if you look a little deeper at that.
But yeah, I could have lived without that. Also, yeah, that was kind of a thing. As for the first bit of this movie, I was like, how old is Pazu? Like, he's got his own home, but like, he's clearly working at the mines. And then in that opening scene where he trumpets, and I'm like, is that his job? Like, is he the town crier? Like,
I'm gonna fill. You know what? I'm gonna fill in a little bit of plot for you here. This is like late 1800s. There was
yeah.
kids working in the mines then. So,
yeah, definitely.
So you know what? You were 14. You had a wife and 3 kids at that point.
Yeah, probably scurvy, HPV. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was kind of funny that scene where the mine captain confronts the pirates and he's like making a big stance. And Patsu's standing next to him, and he's like only up to his hip, but he's trying to like make himself look imposing. And then the miner's wife just grabs him and pulls him inside. Like,
For some reason I thought of like Popeye there or something like that came to my mind.
yeah.
I've seen some like references to that as well. Like online, people commented very similar. Yeah.
Was there ever a scene or moment in the film that like got you really excited or like you really got swept up with what was happening or made you really feel really emotionally excited?
If we're talking about sheer emotion, I think the most heartwarming scene is when Pazu and Shida are like keeping watch together and they're sharing a blanket, and Dola, the pirate captain, is like listening in to everything, and they're talking about what they're gonna do. And
Yeah.
I don't know, something about that moment was really touching to me.
Yeah, like she was just listening like a grandmother, and like she's like rooting for these kids and like really starting to
Yeah.
Fall
yeah,
for them.
yeah.
Yeah, she's like, these, and then I think
Just
the
like
other
her sons.
the sons are watching too. Yeah.
For me, like one of the emotional highs of the film was actually when Paco takes flight with the pirates for the first time. There's like this like general excitement because I feel his excitement in being able to fly for the very first time, and he's going to save Shida. And that was really like an emotional high for me.
You mean Pazu, right?
Yeah, who did I say?
Paco.
Pazu and Dola?
You said Corleone.
Pakzu. See, in English, it almost sounded like Pakzu. Like there was almost like a C in there.
Oh, really?
I don't know. Maybe that was just my half-deaf ear just hearing that.
I did really appreciate the reveal that Dola is actually... I just assumed her husband was going to be long dead, but it turns out he's alive. And he's Dr. Robotnik from the Sonic movies.
Yeah.
I was gonna say he just looks so classic with that mustache, like a bald grandpa with a mustache. There had to be one.
And I love how he's just like the guy tinkering on the ship kind of thing, whereas Dola is like the captain of the ship, the clear captain of the ship.
I also like how when one of the sons is like bringing Pazu to the workshop, he's like, don't keep him waiting. Dad's even worse than mom.
Yeah.
But he's so nice the whole movie.
Yeah.
He never, I don't think he raises his voice
And
at all.
just to bring back to like how badass Dola is when they're running through one of the mines after like blowing up a bunch of the bridges, she just outstrips all of her sons just bolting because she's so excited that she's like gonna get them first. Great dynamics between them all.
That was pretty cool. I also loved that scene at the end when they're all like hovering there,
Yeah.
and they'll just whip out all the treasure they stole.
Yes, that was a fist pound moment kind of thing. Like it was like, yeah, like the heroes won. It felt that was a really satisfying conclusion to the film.
The part that I loved the most, I think, was them landing on Laputa, and in like the Japanese version, I don't know about yours, but like it was silent. Like the awe was just
Yes.
like
Really?
you could feel it. It was like thick in the air. Like they were just so in awe of this place, and you felt it just sitting there. Like you were holding your breath just with your mouth open. I don't know. That was awesome, that reveal.
I felt that as well, like, because we've landed on a foreign world essentially. Like this is a world that humans haven't touched for hundreds of years, and it's futuristic, but it's also completely decrepit at this point.
Actually, if we're talking most moving moments, I might actually withdraw what I just said. I think the reveal that robot is just living in perfect harmony with nature. Like he lifts the little air scooter off the nest, and he's like got all these animals just crawling all over him. It was surprisingly kind of a beautiful moment.
Yeah, and he was bringing the flowers to the memorial.
Yeah, this film is full of quiet, poignant moments throughout. Like there's so many that we could probably bring up here, and it's those quiet moments that make this film, I think, really pop in a sense. Like you mentioned earlier, that quiet moment that they have in the mines with the lights and everything. Like there's so many wow moments in this film.
Yeah.
I want to talk the twist a little bit. So we find out, like, as the story kind of moves along, that Sheeta is actually a Laputa, a
Dun,
heir
dun, dun.
to the world of Laputa, the sky and the castle. That's something that kind of, it feels like we're building towards that just as a modern audience, and having seen all of the films and everything else that we've watched. The reveal that Muska is also a Laputa really shocked me. It came out of left field. Like,
Really?
was there ever, I guess there was one moment when I realized it. At what point did you guys realize that that might be where the story's heading?
For me, it was as soon as he pulled out that notebook, that like while he was searching for like the hidden wall entrance, I started to question, why is he so knowledgeable? Where is he getting this knowledge from if her family is all gone and she has like supposedly all the knowledge of this place and he needs her? Like, why? Like, all he needed was the stone, so why did he keep going back for her? But then you kind of realize he was fine without her, and it was still shining like that beam of light towards the island in the sky or castle.
Yeah, I don't really remember, to be honest, but yeah, he was pretty clearly the main villain the whole time. Like,
But what was his purpose? Earlier on, we didn't think his purpose was to like become the king. I thought he was just winning it for the government, or for like the CIA portion of the government.
I think
scene-
in the beginning, when he's kind of not necessarily the focal villain, he almost feels like the cop in The Iron Giant, or the CIA agent in The Iron Giant. And I can't remember his name right now, where you almost disregard him. And that's slightly because of, like, you know, the bottle over the head kind of thing. But he becomes more and more of a threat as the film goes on. And for me, it was the moment when he said only royals are allowed in the throne room that I went, oh, he's one of the Laputas. That's when I realized it.
the scene when he turned on the general and had all the soldiers murdered, that was pretty fucking cold.
The scene after all the general's men fall, Pazu's just climbing on the vines on the underside of the like this floating castle. They portrayed like the height so well. I was actually so scared for him, and like anybody who's like afraid of heights, I'm not at all, but like you know at that moment that like you would feel that.
That's what I mean. It's a good thing Pazu is like a determined rock climber, because he's got all that finger strength.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The only other thing that I want to comment on story related is I thought the city was going to sink into the ocean and everyone was going to lose it, but it's way cooler than that. Friggin' the whole city of Laputa shoots into space, and we end in the ending credits with it floating around the Earth. That's amazing.
Yeah, really.
Because you would be able to see that from space as well, right? Like, that would be something that would go by every day, and you'd be like, oh, there goes Laputa.
and it was just left with that one robot up there just caring for all the plants. It's back to its natural state. So what happened? It used to be like that probably, and then they built on this whole weapon, which was an intense weapon. The way he actually used it, that was awesome too.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, seeing it up there at the end, like I was like, they should have stayed there. Then it was nice to see them just like say bye to the pirates and then head off to Genoa or wherever she was from.
It almost sounded like Gondor.
Yeah,
in English.
I was getting that too.
It was
Gondor.
like gondola or something like that in English.
Sheeta, what else are you the princess of? But, yeah. If I have a second minor complaint, it's that I would have liked more of an explanation for why Sheeta's family left the city. There's kind of a line about how they wanted to live closer to nature, but they didn't really go much more into it, which I get it, but still, it kind of makes you wonder, maybe I almost would have liked more history of this city.
Yeah, this film definitely leaves you wanting more. Like, I want to live in this world for a lot longer. Like, and that's something that I don't think Studio Ghibli has ever done is had a sequel to any of their films. But if they ever wanted to just explore one of their worlds, this is the one that I would come back to in a heartbeat.
They do have another one that sort of takes place in this world, like a few thousand years apart, apparently. It's called like Nausicaa or something like that.
Oh. The first film. This is the first official Studio Ghibli, and that one happens before this one.
Okay, and yeah, apparently it does take part in the same world, but like completely different stories. I also loved, I don't know if it was cut in your version or not, but the fact that this weapon was used as in the Old Testament and to sink Atlantis, and this has been going on for so long. I think the concept of why the family left was that when you're that far up there and you're looking down at what like these mortals are trying to do, it gets to your head. You're too up in the clouds to really like have a connection there. So they built this crazy thing, and then they realized like we're not really human up here. We have to go back to the earth to be human, I guess.
Yeah, and reconnect with nature as well.
Apparently that's a big Ghibli thing, connecting with nature. Yeah. Apparently that's one of their big recurring themes.
Yeah, and that's definitely present in this film as well.
Also, apparently, just from what I read, Muska is kind of an outlier among Ghibli villains. I guess Ghibli villains tend to be kind of sympathetic and understandable, but I guess Muska is their one, like, pure evil dirtbag villain.
Yeah, I mean, my limited experience of Studio Ghibli would definitely concur with that.
Yeah, and they got Mark Hamill to voice him, so it was a good choice.
I really want to hear that. I'm going to have to look at some, like, clips after or something.
Are you guys going to return to this film at all?
I want to show it to people.
Yeah.
I'm kind of of the same opinion. I genuinely really enjoyed this. I know when I was talking to my parents last weekend and they were asking what our next film was going to be, I said this, and it's an animated. And they were like, we're not going to check that out probably. And after watching it, I'm like, this is a good movie. This is a pretty good movie.
Do you think your parents would like it?
I think my mom could get enveloped in the world. I don't know if my dad would necessarily. Although, what I will say is I also was kind of thinking of Dune as well when I was watching this film.
Really?
Yeah, and how Sheeta is kind of like the chosen one.
You could say that about any like main character of a big world.
Yeah. This is a bit of a stretch. Do you remember when Muska came into the room with the box and she said, "What's in the box?" and he said, "Fear."
No, I'm coming off of working a lot of hours right now, and I don't remember my exact thought process or when I had that thought process. So maybe we'll just move past this.
Hey, as long as we're talking about Sheeta, there is one moment in this movie that made me laugh unintentionally. It's at the end when Musko's holding her at gunpoint and he shoots her pigtails off.
Yeah.
And what's better is when I think when Dola and the pirates rescue her, Dola looks at her hair. And she's like, oh, did he shoot your pigtails off? I hate when that happens. I was like, wait, this happens? Like,
it was almost like a, you know what? I think there's some Western influence in that though. Like you know, the shooting of somebody around somebody kind of thing. Like I felt the Western influence there.
It was to show his like expertise, I guess.
Yes.
In the Japanese version, she is like much more sympathetic about the. Well, she didn't say like I hate when that happens, but she was like, that's like a really bad way to get a haircut, and like
that's
consoling her nicely. Yeah,
that's fair. And I get that like shooting her pigtails off is meant to show that like, you know, she's matured a little bit. Like there's some symbolism there, but it was just pretty ridiculous.
All right, shall we move into effects and filming?
Sure.
To open this up, I actually have a question for you guys. And my question is, do you think this works better as an animated film, the story and the world, than a live action film in 2023? And in 1982 as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Or 86. What's your optimal experience with a story and a world like this?
I think it'll be a great live action in like 2086, because I don't think we can actually do it. Like they would need the biggest budget to do any justice to the painting and like the style, the feel of the film. I don't think we could do that with like all of the CGI and everything that we have now, but it would be cool to see.
For me, where I kind of land is this fits really well as an animated film because they can spend that extra time to build the world and not rely on the crutch of CGI, right? Because bad CGI can really sink a film, even if the story is wonderful.
Yeah, I would leave it for now as a animated. Like it's too crazy of a world.
Yeah. And so here's the tragedy to that then is that people who don't watch animes are gonna miss out on a story like this and experiencing.
I don't know. I feel like even people who don't watch anime might watch a Ghibli movie. I just think the prestige is so high for that studio.
Yeah, and enough people have seen some Studio Ghibli that and like the Western world doesn't necessarily have to watch them. Like it's getting all of the recognition. Like it's a classic. Like this movie specifically is a classic in everyone's minds that has seen it. So it's got the recognition. It made a lot in on its release and
in Japan. Yeah,
I think it was the highest grossing Japanese film at the time. And then I think Spirited Away just blew everything out of the water.
Yeah, Spirited Away is like one of those landmark films in Japanese culture for sure.
By the way, did you guys know that Miyazaki is coming out with his final film this June?
Oh, that's amazing.
No.
He went into retirement in 2014, and then he came out of retirement in 2017 in order to work on this final movie. And it's called How Do You Live? Apparently based on a book. It's coming out this June.
Cool, that's exciting.
This is really exciting.
Yeah, that's very exciting. I'll definitely watch that.
Yeah, let's go see it together.
Yeah, I'm down.
That'd be cool.
We were talking about how we need to go see John Wick 4 together.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, really excited about that film. You did mention in our first episode how this film takes some of the lore of Laputa from Gulliver's Travels. And one kind of small note that I wanted to say here is Laputa is actually a Spanish word, and the translation for that is the whore.
The whore.
And that's something that Miyazaki didn't know about when he used Laputa. It was just the inspiration from Gulliver's Travels.
Whoops.
And kind of the story behind that is Jonathan Swift is actually considered the inventor of black comedy. And so he would have known at that time, because he actually knew some Spanish, what the word would have meant.
Wow. I really didn't envy the guy who had to tell Miyazaki that after the movie came out. They probably just got some poor intern to tell him.
Well, and that's why in the Japanese version, the film is called Laputa, Castle in the Sky, whereas for Western audiences, we just have Castle in the Sky.
Yeah.
We also changed the spelling of Sheeta's name from Shida to Sheeta.
And the pronunciation
really?
of it as well. Because it was Shida in when you were listening to it, was it, Jason?
No, it was like Sheeta or something like that.
Oh,
but,
okay. Sheeta!
Yeah, but they just, like, while I was watching it, it kept saying Shida. And so they changed it to be spelled with E's instead.
There's actually some other historical aspects that Miyazaki used to base the film off of. Like, all of the mechanical and weaponry throughout the film is actually based on some British and German designs, specifically from World War II, which is really cool.
Yeah, I really liked that. It felt fitting for the like time period that they kind of were in, and it like worked well with the steampunk aspect.
Some of the other influences of the film that I might want to talk about quickly. At one point, like, Wizard of Oz kind of popped into my head, and there's definitely some Wizard of Oz kind of vibes to this, especially with Sheeta falling from the sky and kind of entering this world. Indiana Jones, there's obviously got to be a connection there. Miyazaki was definitely inspired by the Indiana Jones series when making this. But in terms of influences, obviously, like, the Bible and Atlantis influenced this film, but it's really cool because it kind of comes full circle in the sense that the Disney Atlantis is heavily inspired by this.
Oh yeah,
I could see that.
The last kind of inspiration that I was reading about online is there's a 1972 sci-fi film called Silent Running, and the end of this film is actually an homage to that film, which is really cool. And I'm always like, I'm a big buff of old sci-fi films, and so that was something that I instantly added to my list to watch is Silent Running.
That sounds like it would be really good if it's based on... Do you know like what it's based on specifically?
I think the film is about an astronaut who's sent into space to destroy a greenhouse or something like that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'd check that out.
Yeah. It's not necessarily super highly rated, but like I said, I really like crummy, cool sci-fi ideas from the 70s and 80s.
When you think about things from a modern perspective, it's pretty insane that they were like thinking of these concepts back then.
Yeah, they're almost like novel concepts at this point, right?
There's almost like no precedence.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they had like some writers that were doing like a lot of sci-fi and stuff, but to portray it like this and like pull those things together, it really was like the beginning kind of.
I mean, like 2001 A Space Odyssey came out almost 60 years ago, and it's one of the greatest sci-fi films of all time. And even the original Star Trek films, right? Like, think about how much from Star Trek is actually used now today. Like, cell phones were essentially in Star Trek, the original Star Trek series, and stuff like that. Like,
and we still don't have some of the tech that they have and that they thought up. Yeah.
I want my phaser.
Well, it's almost like, humans dream about the future, and then because of those dreams, we want to make those dreams a reality. And so we're almost like working towards trying to build that. Like, that's why everybody's always trying to build a lightsaber, right? Like a working lightsaber, because without Star Wars, like, who would have thought to build like...
Yeah. Hopefully we get lightsabers in our lifetime.
That's how I want to die.
I don't know about hopefully, but...
Lightsaber combat.
Lightsaber. Okay, so let's talk score. And this is where I think the real discussion of the English dub versus the subtitles is really going to come into play here. And so, Jason, you watched this with Japanese voice acting and English subtitles, whereas we watched it with the English dub. Do you want to talk about the score that you had in your version of the film?
Yeah, so I am curious actually which version of dub that you got, like, that is on Netflix, because there is actually an updated one and an older one. So the updated one, they actually reverted back to some of the original score.
Oh, really?
Or yeah, so I don't know which one is on there, if it's like the 2003 version or I think there's a 2011 version where they
I think
added some of the, like, it was very synth heavy.
I think Blake and I watched the 2003 version.
Okay.
Yes. So what I'll say is that it is actually online. Like, you can read about that. And so Netflix, the Japanese version that you watched, Jason, uses the original audio mix and score, whereas the English version that we watched on Netflix uses that updated audio mix and score. And the reason behind why they created a whole new score for this film for English audiences is because they didn't think that the Japanese traditional score would have the same effect and draw in an English audience like this new updated score was. And Jason, having watched the Japanese version, like, what's your review of it? Like, should we check out the Japanese subtitle version?
I would say yes, because the sound effects of that synth just like, it feels a lot more cyberpunk. So I think it lends more to that cyberpunk feeling. And
was there kind of like a Tangerine Dream kind of style to it, almost like Thief or something? Or
yeah, like, it had a lot of that, but it was a little bit like bombastic as well. Like, it was a little over the top. And that's where watching it, like, if I was watching it as a Japanese speaker, it might have been too much, but as I was just reading subtitles, like, it didn't interfere too much, but it gave, like, it feels more like it's post-apocalyptic, like, setting. And
okay.
yeah, and then, like, the use of silence, I don't know how, if there is any difference there, but the use of silence plus this, like, over the top, like, hard synths, and then, like, all the layers in between was just perfect. I want to listen, or I want to hear what the differences really are.
Yeah, I'm really excited to listen to the Japanese version at some point as well, because honestly, this is one of the best scores that I've heard in a film in a long time. Like, obviously, we've watched some really great films this year with Trainspotting and The Godfather.
I forgot about Trainspotting.
Yeah, and those are really iconic film scores, but those films are also known for their iconic film scores. Whereas this might be slightly underrated in terms of top film scores of all time at this point in time.
People who are big fans of the movie, like, download and listen to and, like, buy the soundtracks. I don't know which one, but I do want to just add on, like, the best comparison would be Blade Runner 2049 with
really,
like, yeah, the atmosphere of it. Like, it's like an old version of that new sound, and the atmosphere is what I think is going to be the main difference.
I was definitely going to return to this film at some point because I really did fall in love with the film, but you've really sold me on needing to watch the Japanese version now as well, and seeing how it changes the film, essentially. Like, how often do we get the opportunity to watch a film that has completely different scores and see really how the music impacts our emotional attachment with a film, right? That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. I think that might be, like, a thing of the future where, like, with AI, you'll be able to say, like, I want to watch Titanic, but with Blade Runner vibes. And then, like, AI will just create it for you, and it'll be, like, really awesome. But we're not there yet.
Yeah, that would be something. I would have John Carpenter audio in every one of my movies. Or Tangerine Dream.
Ooh.
The actual composer, Jason, I wanted to mention for your version was Joe Hisaishi, who composed this film and then went on to compose essentially every one of the Studio Ghibli films. He became a really close collaborator with Miyazaki. So if you've seen any other Studio Ghibli film and the score was something that you noticed and really appreciated, then you're also going to probably really enjoy the score of this, especially because it's, like, very early on in their development, right? Like, this is like a first attempt at it. Like, this is, you know, oftentimes an artist's earlier works are some of their best. And so I imagine that's ranks up there with tops of his scores of all time.
Yeah, I think in comparison to the other two that I've watched, he kept some of this one, but this one is a little bit more experimental.
So, sequels, prequels, and reboots, do you guys want to discuss Studio Ghibli's filmography at all and kind of where this fits into the filmography? Do you think we've done that enough at this point, or?
I think we've kind of touched on that already. Like we mentioned before, this is the first official Ghibli movie. Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind precedes this. I think Princess Mononoke precedes this too. I could be wrong.
No, this is the first one. Like it's the Wind movie that you mentioned, and then it's this one.
Right. So Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind was the first big collaboration between the founders. And then they founded Ghibli after the success of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, I think, like I mentioned before, I'm not a huge Ghibli fan, but it is kind of interesting looking at this movie and seeing how it tees up a lot of the big themes that Miyazaki would explore throughout the rest of his career. You know, like technology versus nature, violence versus pacifism, you know, young female protagonist. Like, this movie is Ghibli through and through.
Yeah, I would say it's funny that it goes Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind, then Castle in the Sky, and then Grave of the Fireflies is next. And
oh man, I want to watch that movie still.
Yeah, from what I've heard, will just rip your heart to shreds, like, and potentially your mind as well. I don't know the depths of despair that you'll feel, but I feel like Mike, you would love this.
Yes. I'm not even offended that you pegged me as the heartbreaker.
We'll definitely do that on this podcast at some point, because I actually brought that one up as a potential animated film.
Yeah,
that we were considering
and
last year.
And then right after Grave of the Fireflies is My Neighbor Totoro, which, from what I've seen, is the complete opposite of the Grave of the Fireflies. So like this, Castle in the Sky was like quite heartwarming, and then he crushes you with his next one, and then uplifts you with the one after that.
It's funny, I mentioned I'm talking to a girl who's a huge Ghibli fan. We were talking about Ghibli movies, and she mentioned My Neighbor Totoro, and I said, oh, that's with like the big blue monster, right? And she was like, don't call him a monster.
Well, that's actually the mascot. Yeah.
Princess Mononoke is apparently the best one for adults to like get into.
Yes, that I read that as well. So in terms of legacy of this film, there's some really cool direct connections to this film. The first being Toy Story. This movie had a direct influence on the animation style of Toy Story, which is really cool as a Western audience. As a kid who grew up in the 90s, Toy Story is probably top 3 favorite animated films of all time for me personally. Like, it's what kicked off Pixar, right? Like, to know that this film significantly influenced that and Pixar itself is really cool and special to me. The other direct connections that come a little bit later on is, first of all, the video game Minecraft actually has robots that will give flowers to villagers in there, which is a direct connection to this. But even bigger than that, Avengers Age of Ultron actually pays tribute to this, in that the robots are designed to be similar to the robots from Castle in the Sky.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember flowers being handed out in that movie, but
No.
To be honest, I don't remember much from that movie.
Have you guys ever seen another animated film called Treasure Planet?
Yes.
That one, obvious references there, just with the the ship styling and everything.
This is essentially like an adventure treasure hunter film. Like, it falls into the same genre as like Indiana Jones and Tomb Raider and stuff like that, right? Like, it's very similar, and even like Uncharted of recent, right?
Yeah.
And those are all very powerful IPs that have really come to be important to people's lives over the years.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And on that note, I think it's time to talk our personal reviews and the partner factors. Does anybody want to start? Mike, this is your first time with a Studio Ghibli film, so let's start with your thoughts.
Well, let's see. I did watch this with a partner, specifically my heterosexual life partner, my roommate, Pedin. And what's funny is that I'll usually have the movies on in the living room, and he'll kind of just wander in and out of the room, right? But this is the first movie I've watched in a while where, like, his ass was glued to his seat. Like, he watched the whole thing. And actually, he liked it a lot more than I did. And that kind of betrays my opinion. Like, I liked it a lot. I don't think I loved it. I don't think I'll revisit it anytime soon, but my partner really liked it.
So on that note, then, do you think that you'll go and visit any other Studio Ghibli films in the future, or even in the near future?
I think I will. With everything I just said, I think, like, my appetite has woken up. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing some of their other movies.
Would you be more interested in like the more adult themed ones then, or is it another factor that you're like
probably like Blake, you and I were talking about The Whale and how you didn't like it because you thought it was basically depression porn.
Yeah.
And I said I'm okay with depression porn, so I might jump right into Grave of the Fireflies next.
You're a brave man.
I guess so.
Jason, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I overall really liked it. It might fit into the top 100. I don't know. But I really liked it. I did feel that the progression of the film, because it starts off so high and it kind of stays there, it was like a very slight incline throughout the whole watching experience. And then like small... like short, really high blips where like the awe just kicks in, but you're always in this like this state of slightly it's rising
Wonder?
slightly. Yeah. So it didn't feel like there was like highs and lows as much. It felt all the same. And I think that would be the only thing that I would say like didn't work so well for me. But overall, I really enjoyed it, and especially the world building, the like the style, the way they translated that awe was really well done. My partner factor, Annabelle didn't watch this one. She's seen one or two other Studio Ghibli films, and she's just not into them. And I don't think this one would have been one that she would have been like super excited about because it wasn't as drastic. So maybe she would be into Princess Mononoke, but this one, like, she just sat out.
Question for you then, just thinking about what you said. What if the opener was more Pazu's opener and we see everything that happens pre-opening credits as a flashback as Shida explains how she ended up at Pazu's factory, basically? Like, would that maybe change things and keep things like smaller and let the world build more naturally that way? Or
no, I don't think so. But I don't think, now I'm like kind of taking my point back because, well, no, you always stay in this one state throughout the movie, and it's like a state of excitement because it's like as soon as they like wake up in the next morning after he's brought her home and everything, the pirates show up and then the army shows up, and like it just keeps going at the same pace. It's like a breakneck pace that
Right.
I don't know if there's something lost or what.
You know what I'm almost going to compare this to is like Lord of the Rings, the film series. Like, where we start is with the Shire, right? And it feels like this like very small, homely world, and as we go, like things build and the impact of the decisions of the characters builds and becomes like more weighted, right? Whereas, kind of like you said, like we hit the ground running in this one, almost more like Mad Max Fury Road, and the pace and the action just continues on throughout. And so, for example, like when Shida and Pazu are with the pirates and they're flying over their home, like Pazu's home, and there's a sense of like we're leaving this home forever potentially.
Yeah.
I knew in my heart that I was supposed to feel this sense of sadness almost to be leaving this home forever, but to me, like, because of how big the world already was, like I didn't almost have that connection quite to this little home.
Yeah,
anymore.
like there's something small that's missing there, and because everything's so big, I'm not sure how to fully describe it either. But that kind of sums up like a part of it.
For Jess and I, we both really liked it a lot. I think out of every one of us, all of us here, I think I'm probably the highest on this film. I genuinely really, really fell in love with this film and the aesthetic of the film, the world building. Everything about this is kind of just Disney storytelling for me. Like, this is one that I'm going to return to. I will probably show my nephew and or my soon-to-be other nephew or niece at some point in the future. Like, this is a movie that I'm really excited to show people that are special to me at some point in the future. Which is really a cool film. Like, this is going to be one of those first ones that I can show off, right? That maybe their parents aren't necessarily going to watch because it's a Japanese anime film. But, you know, Uncle Blake's going to have all the cool film recommendations at his place, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I like that.
Yeah, I think I might be just like a little bit below you because I really do enjoy this movie, and like my favorite thing is the use of silence in this. Mm-hmm. It works so well.
And you know what? It's going to be really great when you're watching it with someone someday and you'll go, look at that silence. Listen to this silence. Do you hear the silence right now? But no, like you did
silence.
Yeah. But you did say that actually earlier, that this is a movie that you want to show to people. And that fits into a special kind of place in your heart, right? Like that's a special kind of rating to give a movie is one that you want to share with people and experience with somebody else.
Yeah, but there's so many of those though.
Yeah, but even like this year, like, you know, I talk up The Godfather to people who haven't seen it and people that I know who haven't seen it all the time because it's special, but this is a different kind of special. This is a nostalgic kind of special almost.
Yeah.
Hey, I have an idea. We should start a podcast where we talk about movies that we like, and then we could share it with lots of different people.
Yeah.
You guys see what I did there?
A podcast for old movies for new viewers is what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Cool.
We could call it Old Cinema Rewind.
Neat. That being said, I think that is it for this episode, more or less, unless anybody has anything else they wanted to talk about from Castle in the Sky or Studio Ghibli.
I definitely recommend this. That's all I can see. That's where
I feel like out of the three of us, I'm the least high on it, but I would still highly recommend it.
Well, you almost said essentially, too, that you think this is a movie for everyone.
Yeah, I did say that.
And so even though you're not in love with it, like I imagine you still stand by that too.
Yes. I stand by everything I ramble out of my mouth.
Yeah. And that might be kind of what I was saying. Like there's something missing where like it is for everyone. So that means it's of course good, but maybe not like great. It's not like on a Mount Rushmore of like 4 top films of its genre or something like that. But it's definitely up there.
And it's a pioneer in the steampunk genre, but it's not necessarily the highest rated Studio Ghibli film of all time. And we're going to definitely explore more Studio Ghibli films on this podcast. I think we're all pretty amazed with their storytelling process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, to kind of leave things off, next plan for the episode is to do an action-adventure film for the tail end of April here. We haven't actually talked about what we're going to do next, so if you have any recommendations, leave them in the comments. We're going to have to talk about that separate, and if we're going to do another 3-person episode together, because it's always a lot of fun having all 3 of us on.
That's right.
Let's do 4 next time.
Let's invite Kelvin on to just be bewildered by something.
Yeah.
Or amazed by something. Show him something that'll blow his mind.
Kelvin will have no idea what we're talking about.
All right, well, I think that is it for the episode. So until next time.
Signing off.
Signing off. Don't get your pigtails shut off.
Nani? Fuck, I did it wrong. Nani?
Nani?